Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is leading the search for the next head of the Federal Reserve. The president is expected to make his pick by year's end, and Bessent just released his finalists. 5 candidates. You're looking at them heading to a second round of interviews in the coming weeks. The Fed meets tomorrow and again in December and is expected to continue cutting rates. So, David, there's a whole lot going into this selection for the next person that's going to lead the Federal Reserve. Of course, Powell's term is up in May. Some have made the suggestion that he already, kind of dictate his plans about what he's going to do after that term expires, if he's going to stay at the Fed or not. But kind of what are you watching, as the consideration is happening now? We have some candidates who are, some of them are current board members, some of them are former, some of them are in the private sector.
Well, I'm going to, full disclosure, I'm putting my money on Kevin Warsh. I just happen to think that he's been in the right places at the right time. He understands what Bessant and the president are doing together. And I think it's, having said that, Trump, it always manages to surprise you, so you never know. Michelle Bowman is also extremely good. She's a terrific candidate. But I think basically they're looking for a sea change at the Fed. The Fed is dug into its position. Steve was mentioning before how they really don't like productivity because they think the more GDP, the stronger growth is in America, the more risk for inflation. Therefore, productivity, not productivity per se, but growth per se is a bad thing. That Trump doesn't believe in that. Bessent doesn't believe in that. Warsh doesn't. There are others who don't as well. Kevin Hassett's likewise. But this requires changing the mindset of those 300 economists that have been ruling the roost in the Fed for much too long, for Steve and me anyway, and for Larry and others who believe
or maybe just firing
them.
Maybe you don't change your minds. Maybe just fire them.
But there's a possibility that might be done. That what happened at UPS, which we'll talk about later, might be done there. Just a wholesale firing. This might be a Twitter situation where they may even change the name of the organization for all we know. But whoever takes over that position is not only going to have to be good on economics, but he or she is going to have to be a very good manager as well, of managing the way things are done there.
And that could be kind of a tricky role to fill, right? Because ultimately, we know that a lot of the criticism coming into this job has been coming from President Trump. He's not been happy. He's made it very well known, Steve, that he wants interest rates to be lower. He wants markets to be strong. And that has raised some questions among some about Fed independence. And so I wonder, do you have any thoughts about ensuring the Fed's independence as we're also going through this process of replacing the chair of the Federal Reserve, which is happening on time. That would happen no matter who was in the office. But it is coming as President Trump's been very vocal about what he wants.
Well, the idea of the Fed independence, if you read the Constitution, the Federal Reserve is not mentioned as a branch of government. So let's make that clear. And in terms of presidents fighting Fed heads, that's been going on for years. Trump is just more noisy about it, more flamboyant about it. Remember, Lyndon Johnson back in the 1960s took the head of a Fed at his ranch, threw the guy against the chimney because he was the guy the Fed wanted to raise interest rates with. That got raised anyway when the chairman was finally released from the ranch. But in terms of the Fed itself, it's not the independence, it's what is its mission. And David hit on it, this idea that prosperity causes inflation is a disastrous thing. Experience shows it's absolute nonsense. And they never mention the integrity and value of the dollar. And this is what I worry about with the administration.
And that's their job.
But I worry about the administration, all the hints that they want a weaker dollar, the way Bush did in the early 2000s, we saw where that led, or what Nixon wanted in the early 70s, we saw where that led. You undermine the integrity of the dollar, which is already weak in the markets, you get bad things coming in its wake. Dollar should be measure of value, not something that floats up and down like a stock.
Stephen Byron is the strongest voice for that in the administration, and he's at the Fed right now, but he's not one of the names that I see in this list.
I'll make a outlandish prediction. Don't be surprised if Bessent becomes the head of the Fed.
You think so? But didn't President Trump just say, no, he's probably going to stay, in his post at the Treasury? I thought that was off the table.
Well, I just remember Dick Cheney back in the early 2000s heading up the vice presidential choice for George W. Bush, and he ends up with the job. I think Bessent, despite what he says, I haven't talked to him, I think he'd love the job. Great way to end the career. And yes, maybe Kevin Hassett will be the next Treasury Secretary, but don't be surprised if Bessent gets the job.
You stole my whole thesis,
Oh.
Steve. My whole thesis was like they got Bessent at 3% chance of being the guy. I think he should be the guy, actually. I think he understands the president well enough to do this job without feeling like he's unduly influenced. He's obviously been in the game for a while now. He knows the current environment. Nobody has a clearer view, in my view, of what needs to happen at the Fed than Scott Bessent, because he's laid it out already. He's got the plan. Nobody's had a better plan for it. So let's dispense with the niceties here. Scott Bessent is probably the guy for this moment to be Fed chair. I like the fact that he's running this process. But maybe at the end of it all, the president says, great list, Scott, but what are you going to be doing for the next 14 years?
This is what I love about the show, that you can think that, and I completely disagree with you.
All right.
I actually think that Scott is doing a great job. Treasury Secretary Bessent is doing a great job in the current role. And I think that he is an integral part of communicating and the trustworthiness of this administration. I think they would be foolish to change that. What I actually see in this process is that not only does Secretary Bessent know all these folks and has talked to them multiple times, he keeps talking to them. That suggests to me that they are having really serious, deep conversations where they walk away from it, they think about things, they come back to the table, and the consideration is being made on a different level, like when you're interviewing a job candidate, and it takes many, many, many rounds to get to the final conclusion versus just saying, these are all smart, terrific people. Any of them could do the job, but I really believe that they want to get the right person to do the job, and I think that's what Bessent is trying to drill down on.
He might just be that guy. See, I'm
I don't
influenced
think so.
in Star Wars, Jackie. Darth Vader strikes down Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it doesn't matter because Obi-Wan Kenobi becomes more powerful than you can possibly imagine. If Bessent leaves Treasury and goes to the Fed, I believe he becomes more powerful
What
than you can possibly
what
imagine.
worries me about Bessent leaving the White House is he has been a brake on some of President Trump's more outlandish trade views.
Yes.
I mean, he's pulled.
That's
there
what
have been certain times when he literally pulled the president back, take a special flight with the president to convince him that maybe you shouldn't go quite that far here or there. But I love that sort of moderating influence that he has on the president, and I think the world would feel a little more comfortable if he stayed in the White House.
I agree with that. And also, once you plug the hole of who becomes the Fed chair, if you do move Bessent over there, now you've got a hole as Treasury Secretary, and it's a very important job, as David is pointing out. And so I think that sounding board that he has been for the president and Latnick and everybody else, Peter Navarro, et cetera, has been a really good it's a good dynamic between all of them.
I think the monetary world needs its Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Well, I think Trump, speaking to reporters just over the weekend, said that the person that's leading the Fed right now, i.e. Powell, I think the quote was, is not the smartest. So according to Trump, I think
That's the nicest thing he said about Powell.
safe to say it's probably up from here, given the slate of amazing candidates that they're considering.
I think by law, Trump can't appoint himself as head of the Fed, can he?
Don't think so.
Now that's one we didn't consider.
Don't count it out.
I wouldn't. Maybe he'll try. Okay, well, Jackie, let's switch gears and talk about UPS.
Let's do that. Big story today. Shares of UPS, they are up almost 7% as we speak right now, on pace for the best day that the company's seen since 2022 after third quarter earnings. The company also announcing that it will cut 48,000 jobs. And so as we announce, or companies are announcing rather, more job cuts, and we're looking at this, I'm wondering if part of this isn't definitely some automation in there, but also just an environment that is more difficult to operate in, more cost-cutting, to kind of make the bottom line look a little bit better because of some of the struggles out there in the economy.
Well, let me link it to, so I think some of those 48,000 have been announced already, so that's kind of like a cumulative thing. But UPS's Amazon traffic is down more than 20%. So you got to link this to the Amazon story. Amazon's getting more efficient. It's also integrating its own delivery services. That pushes UPS out. They've got to find new customers, and that's part of the reason why they've got to get leaner.
Yeah.
That's true. I can tell you from all the many Amazon purchases I'm making, none of them are delivered by UPS. They're always by these individual kind of almost like Uber-like delivery services. People that come to your house and just drop it off.
UPS has got to figure that out.
I would like to remind folks that UPS is unionized, FedEx is not. So there must have been a lot of talks between the Teamsters and UPS to be able to do this. Might be easier for FedEx to do that sort of thing, so watch out for FedEx.
But they signed that big union contract a couple of years ago, and everyone said, whoa, that's a big pay increase.
Yeah.
Now look what happened.
Oh, good point. All right, coming up,